So many wood shavings. So in this video I'm going to show you more preparation for planking the inside hulls, both of the inside hulls. A lot of that involves this Western red cedar and getting it cut and scarfed, and a lot of sanding and preparation work. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting progress in this video. So follow along and I'll show you all the steps involved. So the first step of all the extra sanding is to remove the squeeze out. So I sanded off all the squeeze out along places like this with the air-powered detail sander. And there's a few other places that I'll finish up with the sanding block. For instance, along here, this joint here needs to be roughed up a little bit. But I didn't do everything with the detail sander. I got all the spots that were going to be most difficult, or difficult to use the sanding block to sand, and used the detail sander for all the difficult areas, because I wanted to finish that up so that I could take the sander apart, get all the water out of it, and get it oiled up and put back together and put it away. I don't want to be using it all the time because it'll rust if it gets too much water in there collecting. So I wanted to get that job finished and then get the detailed sander cleaned up and put away. So the next job is going to be to start planing some of the cedar planks. So I moved over a couple stacks of the cedar planks. This is the cedar that I bought originally, and I used, for instance, to reinforce the hull bottoms, and it's also here on the other side of the hull side. And I have enough here. I think there's 20 pieces of, it's about 3 1/4 inch wide and maybe just a little over 1/2 inch thick, and that should be enough to start planking the inside hull side. And I figure I should be able to get up to about this high with the wood that I have here. And by when I say get up this high, I mean on both sides. So I should be able to plank both hulls up about maybe 16 inches or so on either side. And that'll take about halfway, and it'll probably need another 20 pieces of these cedar boards to get the inside hull planked all the way up to the bridge deck stringer. But for right now, I want to start running these through the planer and take the rough edges off a little bit and get the thickness down just a little bit. I'll probably make it a little bit thicker than I did for the previous planking. Well, that's all done. It made a huge mess, and in the end I have all of the boards planed down to about 16 millimeters, or about 5/8 of an inch thick, and that should give a nice uniform board thickness to work with. And I used to run the thickness planer with the shop vac attached to it, And what I found was that the thickness planer would just periodically shut down. The vacuum would keep running, and I thought that there was something wrong with the thickness planer. It turns out that I was just overloading the circuit breaker, and it wasn't quite tripping completely off, but it was just almost going to trip, and it was just enough that the thickness planer detected that and shut itself off. So by running the thickness planer by itself, I didn't have any more problems with shutting down. It ran continuously. It just makes a bigger mess. So I'm going to get this all cleaned up, and then I'm going to rip these in half because some of them are a bit warped anyway, and if they're half the width, then that's going to make it easier to straighten them out. And as well, the bottom of the hull is curved, and I've been trying to figure out, should I try to work from the top down or the bottom up? And if I work from the bottom up, which I prefer to do, then the problem is, do I try to bend the boards to match the curve of the hull bottom, or do I try to take the first probably like 3 or 4 rows and try to trim them so that they remain straight, and then thereafter all the boards would be perfectly straight going up the rest of the hull side? And that's going to be a lot of trouble. So I think it's just going to be easier, and because some of the boards are warped anyway, to just go ahead and rip them all to half their thickness, and that should allow me to just epoxy them all in with a slight curve all the way up the hull side. So that's the plan, and on to the next step, get all these ripped in half. So after thinking about this some more, I think I'm going to change the plan. So instead of trying to plank either from the bottom up or planking from the top down, I think I'm going to plank from both directions and meet in the middle. And what that will allow me to do is to go ahead and cut this bottom row, and maybe even the bottom 2 or 3 rows, to a curve to fit the whole bottom. And once I get that in place, the top one should be mostly straight, and where it meets in the middle, if I need some adjustment in the middle, then I can always cut those at an angle to fit. So what I need to do is cut some scarf joints to join the planking together. And one of the reasons that I'm doing this, making this change, is so that I can keep these boards at their full 3 1/4 inch width without having to rip them. That, I think, should be less work and probably result in a better finish, and it'll cut down the gluing in half. So if I was to cut these in half, rip these in half, then that's an extra, I'm doubling the glue joints. I'm adding an extra glue joint for every board. So this will cut down the glue joints, result in straight boards, and I think this is the approach I'm going to go with. So I need to figure out now how to cut these scarf joints in the wider boards. This is the setup that I've been using so far to cut the scarf joints in the narrower boards, and I have the miter saw set up with the blade here at about I think it's a 7 or 8 degree angle, so it's just off of 0, and then I clamped a board with a 90-degree angle right here, so you can see that there's a bit of an angle. And then by taking the boards upright like this, up against this edge and cutting, I was able to get that angle. And that works when the boards are only this wide. Now I've got a board this wide, and this little saw is just not going to cut through the whole thing. So I'm going to see if I can cut through half of it at least, and we'll see where it goes from there. So I was able to cut through actually more than half of the board. So this is the angle it cut through to about right in here. If you flip this over, you can see the angle of the cut there. So I might be able to just finish this off with a handsaw, or maybe even put it on the bandsaw to finish it off. I clamped the board onto the vise of my workbench, and I'm using this pull saw to finish the cut. Let me see if I can hold the camera here with one hand. There we go. And see what this looks like when I finish. Alright, well, it's a bit rough, but I think maybe hitting that with a little bit of the sander should clean that up. So I think that will work to make the scarves. The angle is a little bit different here. You can see the edge started curving in a bit, so that means that the surface here is a bit bowed. But all in all, I think that will work. I'll start the cut with the miter saw and just finish it up with the hand pull saw. There are 6 of the boards now with the scarf joints, and I have lined them up and clamp them together so that they form one long incline roughly. And now I can go through and sand all of them at once, and that should help to maintain the overall angle by having such a large surface area here. So it should eliminate any sanding errors, or at least reduce the sanding errors to a minimum by having them all clamped together like this. So now it's time to get them sanded. I like the look of this, so if there are any imperfections remaining, this will all get joined together with thickened epoxy, so I don't need to worry about, for instance, there are a bunch of little notches here in this. I don't need to worry about sanding those out. I mainly want to make sure that the edges come up to a nice feathered taper on all of these. So that's really all that I'm looking for here. So I think this is good, and I'm going to go ahead and get these epoxied together in preparation for once this cures, to be able to put it onto one of the hulls. I just got a new order of fiberglass in today, and I'm a bit disappointed because I ordered some 6-ounce fiberglass on a roll, and they sent it to me folded like this. So I'm going to be returning this and see if I can find some fiberglass that actually does come on the roll. So yeah, so a bit disappointing there, but I do have some other fiberglass already. This was just some extra fiberglass. Unfortunately, it's going to have to go back. The scarf joints here worked out really well. This epoxy has cured now, and I've sanded it. I've sanded all the squeeze out. So this joint here is ready, and I now have a board here that is just under 20 feet long. The boards were initially 10 feet, and with the overlap, that makes it just under 20 feet long. But that's okay, because this first board is going to get cut to the curve of the hull. So I've just got it laying here right now, resting on the build platform, but eventually it'll get lifted up here a little bit so that it will sit on this edge of the hull bottom. And one of the things that I want to avoid is having all of these scarf joints lined up right here in the middle. So, some of these are going to have to be here, some will be back here a bit, some will be over there. I want them staggered. And this first board will work out really well for that, because down here it doesn't need to go all the way to the front because of the curve in the hull bottom. Even once it's lifted up, I think it'll probably end up maybe somewhere around there. We'll see exactly where, but I'm thinking somewhere around there, so you can see it's not going anywhere near all the way to the bow. And back here, it's definitely going to get cut off shorter back here. And I planned this board in particular because it has a huge split in it. Let me move it here a bit in the light. So this board has a giant split down the middle, and that's fine. All of this here, even way back into here, past the split. So the split comes even further here. Past the split, that'll get cut off because the hull bottom curves up so much that when this is on here like this, it'll probably get cut off somewhere around in here somewhere. So that should allow this first board to shift a bit, and then the second one can be aligned differently. I made up 3 of these 20-foot long boards, and so the first 2 here I'll be able to shift so that the scarf joints don't line up, and the third one I'll probably put on the other hull side. And then when it comes time to make the rest of these boards, I'll need to plan them out properly so that the scarf joints don't all line up. So that's what I'm going to do right now, is get these boards ready for scarfing, and slowly start gluing them together while I work on the boards that are already glued together. I try to examine the boards as carefully as I can. So with this board, there's a crack that runs from pretty much this knot all along here, and it looks like it goes away right here, but it doesn't. If you flip the board over, it just continues from this side all the way down and along here all the way to the end. So of this 10-foot board, really the only full width piece is this part right here, probably about 3 feet, maybe a little more, that's usable for the full width. Now, it doesn't mean this board is completely useless. I can still use this portion of it, and I might find a use for that later. So I'll keep this board, but I want to make sure that I put it off to the side so that I don't forget about this crack in there. I started out with 20 boards, Western red cedar boards, each 10 feet long, and the first 6 I already scarfed and epoxied together like these 2. The other set that's scarfed together and glued together is on the other side. That's the one with the giant split in the end that I just showed you. And of the remaining 14, there were 5 full-length boards here that are completely usable at the full width, and these others I've sorted here according to their lengths after cutting them to remove other splits and any giant knots or any big loose knots that might come loose. So I cut those out, and with these boards now sorted and cut according to their usable lengths, I should be able to figure out which ones to scarf together to get the remaining 20 feet long pieces for the hull sides. So what I did of the various cutoff pieces was, well, I had a total of 12 of the cutoff pieces. So in other words, 12 pieces that were shorter, that were all shorter than the 10 feet original length. And I took the 6 shortest pieces and matched them up with the 6 longest pieces so that the shortest piece went with the longest and backwards like that. And that gives now 6 boards. Once they're scarfed together, that gives 6 boards here in the front that will all be longer than the original 10 feet boards, which I still have 5 of those. So that means I should be able to get 5 boards that are just over 20 feet long out of all of this, with a couple left over that I'll use for the next batch. So I'll need to get more of the Western Red Cedar, and this will be I'll have 2 boards, 2 of these cutoff boards. I'll have 2 of these left over from this that will help me get started on the next batch. I finished the initial cuts in all of the boards with the miter saw, cutting it as deep as I can, so I'll need to finish this off with the pull saw. And since I'm doing all of this, I went ahead and went to the store and got another 20 Western Red Cedar boards. So this is a stack of 10 and 10. So this should be enough to fully plank the entire hull side up to the bridge deck level for both hulls. And I think I'm going to go ahead and put these through the thickness planer now to get them down to the same thickness as the first set of boards. So let's see, each of the, since I just bought these today, each of these boards was around, I want to say it was either $13 or $14 each. Anyway, with tax and everything, it came to around $300 for the new set of boards. So that means that it's about the same as the previous set, so it'll be about a total of about $600 worth of Western Red Cedar to plank the inside hulls on both hulls. So that's alright, so I'm going to get started getting these down to the right thickness. I think I have an even bigger pile of wood shavings this time than I did before. The thickness of these boards can vary a lot initially, and at least 3 of them were a good 1/16 of an inch thicker than all of the others. I had to run those through the planer special by raising the thickness a little bit and planing them down, because they couldn't fit through the planer with the settings that I had for all the others for their initial pass. Once they'd all been through the planer at least once though, then the thickness was mostly the same. And then it was just a matter of getting it down to about the 16 millimeter that I'm looking for. And I matched it up with the thickness of these as close as I could. It's a pretty good match. So yeah, so these boards are now ready for getting their scarf joints. And I'll just continue scarfing and gluing and getting it all put together, and also cutting this board to fit. So I think I might actually put all of that in another video. So this is a good point to stop here and show you the progress so far. So, all right, I'll put all this out and get this published. All right, bye.